Alright folks, welcome to another video. Today we are talking about what I personally believe to be, if it does exist, which we know it doesn't exist, but the perfect camera. And I'm talking about the EM1 Mark III by Olympus. What I do for a living is primarily real estate photography and videography and wedding videography. I also do corporate headshots, family photos, senior photos, a lot of corporate video, event photos and event video, that kind of thing. So pretty much a little bit of everything, but the meat and potatoes of my business is the real estate photography. That keeps me busy throughout the summer, and I'm actually starting to pick up and get pretty busy with the whole wedding filmmaking side of things also. And for every single project, no matter what it is, I have always gone back to the Olympus EM1 Mark III. Little backstory, I started out on a DSLR. I think I had, well, my very first camera was the 5500 or whatever, the crop sensor, but I quickly jumped to the Nikon D4, and then from there I went to the Sony A6500. So I went from a D4 to a mirrorless, which was the Sony A6500, and then I wanted to go back to full frame, so I jumped up to the Sony A7 III. And then I started hearing about the Panasonic GH5, because when I started getting into wedding films, I noticed that everybody was using the Panasonic GH5, and then I heard how amazing the image stabilization was, and you just had to experience it to believe it. And shooting on a gimbal the entire day for a wedding, first of all, it just is annoying, and it's very difficult to even get good shots, and it's not necessary. And so I did. I got a Panasonic GH5. And then I realized, man, this autofocus isn't good at all. Matter of fact, it's horrible. I can't even use it. But then I decided, okay, I'm going to start to have fun with manual focus and become really good and fluent with that. And I did, and I still do use manual focus, especially for weddings. There's times where you absolutely need to be in manual focus, and there's also times where you need autofocus. It's as simple as that. Because we're not set up like the pros with a rig and a focus puller, separate person just to pull focus and all that stuff. We got to be realistic. These are tools, and I'm picking the best tool for the job. And honestly, this is like a one of those Swiss Army knives, you know what I mean? It's got a knife, it's got a corkscrew, it's got scissors, it's got whatever, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it for me anyway, Micro Four Thirds in this Olympus camera covers it all for me. I keep going back, like maybe I should upgrade to full frame. And I'm thinking, well, no, then the image stabilization isn't that great, and the bodies alone, like my camera if money wasn't an object, I'd go with the A7 III or A7S III. I want to bring you into my computer right now, and I'm going to show you a few things. So remember, I told you I'm primarily a real estate photographer and videographer, and I'm going to show you some of the pros and some of the cons to this, and why I use it for just about every project, no matter what it is. So here is a clip of a listing shoot that I did, and I want to show you first off the reason why I'm going to say go with the EM1 Mark III. If you are considering Micro Four Thirds and you're debating whether or not, what's the difference between the Mark II and the Mark III, a couple things. When you're shooting video, you are able to do auto ISO with the EM1 Mark III. You cannot do auto ISO in manual mode with the EM1 Mark II. And a lot of people are going to criticize me for even considering using auto ISO, but I'm going to show you why it, in certain situations, shooting real estate video is crucial. And here, take a look at this. So here's a transition going into a bedroom. It was fairly dark, so I had to have the ISO bumped up. But then I come into a sunroom, which has plenty of light in it, and so I needed to adjust it. So I wanted to make this one clip to show this sunroom off of this bedroom. And let's just play this really quick. I'm going to show you how smooth it transitions. Boom, right there. Now, the other issue that people are going to have with Micro Four Thirds, or they've been hearing about, or maybe you've experienced this for yourself, is the low light performance. They're not great at low light. But to be honest with you, I have shot plenty of video clips at 1600 ISO, 2000 ISO, and they're usable, and I use them. So here's an example of me shooting it. It was either 3000 or 4000 ISO. I'm just going to take a look because I'll be able to tell. Yeah, this is either at 3200 or 4000 ISO. And here's that clip right here. It was in the stairwell, and I even told the realtor, I'm like, I'm not sure if this is even going to look good. And yes, I'll be honest, I said, I don't know if it's even going to work. But I got it back, and I actually didn't think it was that bad. Here it is, right here. Boom, right there. Right there. Let's blow it up. Full frame. Let's go back. Yes, it's a little noisy, but it's not as noisy as I thought it was going to be at 4000 ISO. I mean, it's technically... And here's the thing I've learned with higher ISO. If your exposure is correct and you have enough light at that, but you have to make sure your exposure is correct. In other words, if you're at a high ISO and you're still underexposed and you try to go bring that exposure up in post, yes, it's going to get noisy. It's going to get noisy at 200 ISO if you're underexposed and you try to bring up those shadows and highlights. But even way worse when you're shooting at higher ISOs. So I just cranked this until my exposure read 0 on my meter, and that was around 4000 for this. And that was going into the upstairs too. Now look at, yes, we are losing dynamic range, especially at higher ISOs. You will lose dynamic range, but I mean, still not that bad. Yes, we're blowing this out, but again, I just quickly transitioned to a different shot. So, a couple of the reasons why I absolutely love this camera. Yes, I've talked about it already. It was like the GH5 with awesome autofocus. Okay, it had the amazing image, in-body image stabilization. I'm gonna hand hold this all the time, and I do walking shots during weddings with this camera. Bride and groom are walking towards me. I'll just hold my camera and just walk back with them on a 25mm, 50mm full frame equivalent, not even super wide. The phase detection autofocus is just as good as my Sony a7 III, if not better. I mean, this camera does face tracking. It'll stick with a face. It'll actually put a box around two people, and then you're able to tap the other box if you want it to lock on that person. It'll stay on that person. It won't jump back and forth, which is an awesome feature of this camera. The other really awesome feature that this camera has that the EM1 Mark II does not have, I mean, this is basically the same as an EM1 Mark II as far as video quality goes and, you know, the functions. The eye autofocus does pick up a little bit quicker and further away than this camera, which is why I use this for portraits instead of the Mark II. But even with firmware updates now, the Mark II is just right there alongside this pretty much. But one of the features that I use during weddings is I toggle back and forth while recording between autofocus and manual focus. I let the autofocus lock in with my 1-point autofocus. And actually right now for this video, I am shooting on the EM1 Mark II with the Panasonic 12 to 35 f2.8. And we're at f2.8 right now. I think we're at ISO 500. Yep. I got the focus right there, so I'm not sure if it's actually let's hope I'm in focus, but I set the AEL AFL button right here on the back of my camera. Allows me to toggle back and forth between auto and manual focus when recording, and I don't have a lens on it right now, otherwise it would do it. But so when I know I'm locked in on a subject, I'll just hit that button while recording. It'll go into manual focus for me, and I can go, and I'm not worried if the subject isn't moving, obviously, and I know that they're going to be locked into focus. Now, the only downside with the EM1 Mark II is it doesn't, as soon as you hit record, you're not able to you're not able to change it back to manual focus if you're in autofocus, and manual focus if you were in autofocus, vice versa, okay? So, that's why I would say if you are a wedding filmmaker and you'd like to have that ability to go back and forth between auto and manual focus while recording, then EM1 Mark III definitely is the camera to go with. let's take a look at the stabilization. I'm going to bring you in and show you some wedding clips. Here is a walking shot. Okay, check this out. This is raw footage. Here is handheld, me holding the camera just like this, right here, walking backwards through a field with the bride and groom tracking them as they're walking towards me. So let's play that and I'll show you. And you got to remember, I'm only taking parts of this. But you can hold this camera perfectly still when you need to. And look at how smooth that is. If I told you I use my gimbal for this, you would believe me. I mean, look at how smooth that is. So now let's take a look at portrait work. If you want to be doing family photos, and you're thinking, well, Micro Four Thirds doesn't have enough bokeh, doesn't blur the background enough. Yes, it does. I shoot on the Sigma 56 f1.4, and I can do family photos at 1.4 all day long. So let me show you that. Boom. Check that out. Look at how awesome that looks. The color rendition, I mean, that Sigma lens is amazing, by the way. Sorry, this was shot on the Olympus 75mm f1.8. I love compression. I love the compression of telephoto, focal lengths. You're anywhere between, 45 or 90 millimeters. Remember, Micro Four Thirds is a 2x crop. So when I'm saying 45, just multiply that by 2, and that's your full frame equivalent. It's too hard to go back and forth all the time. So anyway, so this 75 millimeter, what's that? 150 millimeters at f1.8. So yes, the background blur is going to register as if you were shooting on a 150 millimeter or f1.8, which again, full frame, you're talking 150 millimeters, so you definitely get a lot of compression. But it's going to be acting as a f3.6. So you don't have a super shallow depth of field, but you get a nice separation. Let me show you another shot. All right, so here's another one. Same lens, that 75mm f1.8. You get a subject, you get a little bit closer to them. Look at that. You can just blur the background out like full frame. No big deal. Let me try to find one more. Yeah, like it doesn't obliterate the background, and a lot of times I don't want it to. I mean, people have used bokeh now instead of composition. See, here's another example, like how it doesn't just completely obliterate. I mean, you can tell there's a bush here and a tree here. So what's the other part of my business? The other part of my business is corporate headshots. Let's take a look at those. Here's an example of a corporate headshot that I did for a realtor. And so this was the Sigma 56mm. And actually, I shot this at f2.8 because I wanted to make sure, when you're shooting headshots now, even with a Micro Four Thirds, you're shooting at 1.4, it's going to leave the hair, in the back of them out of focus. And I like to cut the background out and put different backgrounds in for them. So that just makes it easier to have everything in focus. So this was shot at f2.8. But check it out how clean this is. I mean, look at how sharp that is. That Sigma lens is phenomenal. That is why I absolutely love this camera. The other downside, I would say, to this camera coming from the GH5 was the GH5 did unlimited recording, and it gave you one file. This stops at about 29 minutes, and it breaks it up into 4-minute files, which is super annoying. So if I know that I'm ever going to be doing multicam work, especially for the ceremonies, I found an amazing workaround, and that is to use the Atomos Ninja 5 via HDMI. And the prices have actually come way down on those. I think you can pick them up for $400 or $500 now. But the advantage of that is, with the EM1 Mark III, you can shoot ProRes RAW out of that now. 12-bit color. So, yeah, you get a lot more room in post to play with and push the colors around and color grade. But I rarely shoot ProRes RAW now. I was on a kick with shooting it, and to be honest with you, the huge file sizes does get annoying after a while. But I do use the Atomos Ninja 5 for all my ceremonies. We run 3 cameras for a ceremony. My main camera, I'm on the EM1 Mark III, and then I have 2 other EM1 Mark IIs. And the nice thing about the EM1 Mark II, actually, is it still will let you shoot ProRes LT or HQ from the Atomos. It actually gives you, instead of the 8-bit 420 codec, once you go through the Atomos, you get 422. So gives you a little bit better quality in that regards, but you get one file, unlimited recording. Now, I will say this, for whatever reason, and if there is anybody out there watching this and actually knows this, when I'm using the EM1 Mark II and I'm shooting on the Atomos, if you do anything going into the menu or try to adjust your exposure or whatever, the Atomos will stop recording and instantly start up a new clip. Like every time you touch that, it'll just start a new clip recording. It doesn't like skip a beat or anything, it just cuts the file and starts a new recording. So if you're in your camera messing with it or messing with your exposure to go from autofocus or manual focus, it'll stop, and it's frustrating because it'll just stop and cut so you'll lose the ability to have one clip there. But with the EM1 Mark III, it doesn't. It's all one clip. Or you can go back and forth between autofocus and manual focus, and it doesn't affect the Atomos recording whatsoever. Not sure why that is. I still have to look into it. But the ergonomics, this camera just feels really good in the hand. The flip-out screen. I mean, all day long shooting like this, getting amazing. And you can just hold these cameras so steady. And you can do reveals behind things with this. I hardly ever use a gimbal. The only time I'll ever use a gimbal with this camera is if I'm doing a venue establisher where I need that shot buttery smooth, panning down. Let me show you that right now. Here's a teaser film that I made for a couple. Watch this. This is shot all on the EM1 Mark III and EM1 Mark II in Cinema 4K. That's where I use the gimbal. Not there. Just establisher shots, that's it. Handheld still. Where's the ceremony? Edit. Look at that clip. So this is the our camera left. This was the EM1 Mark II shooting ProRes LT. Here's the other angle, shooting ProRes LT on my other EM1 Mark II. And then I was on the Panasonic 25mm f1.4. There's another one. So the sun was coming in, so you could see that. And maybe I could have gotten rid of that by having a lens hood on there, which I hardly ever run with those because they're just extra things that I have to deal with. But the color rendition, look at how beautiful that looks. Look at the colors just pop. So it doesn't have log, but it has what's called Olympus OM log. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. Leave me a comment below if you have any questions about this camera. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we will see you in the next video, guys. Bye-bye.